Well, good morning, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome in across the continent for another very exciting Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants broadcast. We've got kids today in British Columbia to Nova Scotia in Canada and Wyoming to Michigan in the United States. So truly pretty much coast to coast in both countries. So exciting to have you all joining us for an epic adventure featuring the coolest scientists and explorers on planet Earth. Now, earlier today, we had Satish Venkatesh joining us all the way in Sri Lanka to talk about Asian elephants. And you know what? We didn't have enough fun with elephants then, so we had to have a second broadcast today. So we've got Renee Byers joining us, and on behalf of the amazing folks at Elephanatics. So a few years back, we did our first program with Elephanatics. They do such great work to help people understand and work to conserve elephants. And so today we are going to do a deep dive on African elephants, what a special creature they are, and such one of the most amazing ecosystems on planet Earth. So without further ado, if you're all as excited as I am, I'm going to welcome in Dr. Byers. Thank you so much for joining us today, and welcome back to the show.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I'm pretty excited to talk about elephants, which are my favorite animals.
That's a good thing to have. I was telling our kids earlier today, like the greatest travel experience of my life was in being in Tanzania and seeing elephants up close and personal. Mm-hmm. And so for someone who's gotten to work on them as a scientist and explorer, it's so amazing to have you on today to share your passion and expertise. And since I know you do have a lot to share with us, I'm going to zip it and leave it to you to bring up your presentation and take us away, man.
Yeah, well, just before I start, the first time I ever saw an elephant in the wild was I think in my 20s, and we were driving in a car in Botswana, and we stopped to look at a bird, and there was actually an elephant standing next to the car, which we hadn't seen. And then I was looking outside, and there was this massive animal that really impressed me at the time. And since then, I've always been interested in elephants. So, yeah, I'm a researcher at the University of British Columbia, and I'm also a director of Elephanatics, which is a non-profit organization that we have in Vancouver, British Columbia, to protect elephants. Although I know there are no elephants in British Columbia, but we still try to do our best to do and protect them somewhere else. And what we do, I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but in the meantime, I think I'll just kick off with the presentation that I have prepared.
Well, and
is this visible?
As you're pulling it, not yet. Sorry. No, I'll just make sure I'll let you know when it's up. But as you're pulling it up, just what a special experience in Botswana, which is truly one of the most amazing places on planet Earth. So I hope everyone gets the chance to go in their lives if they can.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it is very nice because Botswana is still a pretty wild place to be, and yeah, you really feel like you're in the bush when you're there.
Special spot. Let's bring this up. Sorry, it's not up just yet, so we'll make sure it gets up and I'll confirm everything's all good.
Yeah. Okay.
Perfect. Well, it's on your end. You've got to pull it up on present and share screen. There we are. Yeah. Perfect. And no, we're in a weird thing with your thing. It's not your PowerPoint right now. Sorry, Renee. We tested this 2 seconds ago and it worked perfectly. I don't know why it's getting
okay. I'll start again. Sorry.
No worries.
Present.
Something should go a little awry in every video call. Otherwise, it's no fun. This is the essence of my job, really.
Now it should be on.
Perfect. No, we're deep in it's sharing a little banner instead. When you go to share, try entire screen and see if we can pull up the PowerPoint from there. Sorry, folks.
It says you are sharing your entire screen. Oh.
That's very exciting. This is a first for us, the way that it's coming up. I've actually never seen this in 2000 broadcasts. It's kind of fun.
This is funny because, it did work a few minutes ago.
Mere minute ago. Thanks for your patience, kids. We're going to get this up and going really soon. Oh, dear.
Do you see it now?
No, it's doing that same weird thing. It just seems to bring up that little banner. How about if you've is the PowerPoint a window? Do you want to try it that way? Or
it is a window, yeah. Let me. Okay, let's
take your time. You're good.
Yeah, I will start all over again.
What I'll say, while you're doing that, I'll put you in the background and I'll see it when it comes up for a quick sec. I'll just note that this program, our Elephanatics programs in general, and Satish's program are all on our YouTube channel. So if you want to check them out in like 3 weeks or 3 years, they'll all be right there when we are done. Renee, we're pretty much good. We've got your presentation up, and if there's a way to make it full screen, it'll be golden. No. Perfect. Couldn't be better.
Okay.
Hey.
That's a relief.
No pressure, man. You're good.
Okay. Yeah, so today I'm going to talk about elephants, but not just elephants. I'm going to talk about, I'll give a few cool facts about elephants, but also I will talk about the habitat that they live in and the species that they share their habitat with, and how it all fits together, and how they all live together. And then hopefully at the end of the presentation, you will realize how important these animals actually are. So, as I said, I'm a researcher at the University of British Columbia and a director at Elephanatics. I have worked and lived in both Central and East Africa. Which has been for several years. It's been a great experience actually to live there and work with in conservation. So one of the first things we should maybe ask ourselves, how many species of elephants are there? Most people would say two, African and Asian. But actually, there are in Africa two species of elephants. It's the forest elephant and the savanna elephant. So the forest elephant obviously lives in the forest. It's a bit smaller than the savanna elephant, or what is also called the bush elephant. Its ears are more rounded, its tusks are a little more straight. And they're very, very hard to see. So when we were working in Africa on counting elephants, we had to go through the forest and try to find them, but usually you just can't see them. So we were relying on dung to count those elephants. And we were counting actually the dung and not the elephants themselves. So the savanna elephant is bigger. It has larger ears, usually bigger tusks also, and lives in a mostly open habitat. So elephants are incredible animals because they're very social, they're very smart, they're also very odd looking, they're very large. So they tick off a lot of boxes for being a cool animal. And they live in herds of females and their young. Elephant herd is led by an older and wiser female, which is called the matriarch. The older males, they're not welcome. They have to, live on their own, or they sometimes live in groups together. But really, it is the female elephants that have everything to say here. They take very good care of their young, and they help them when they're in trouble. But they also help each other's young. They have great memory, and which is very useful because sometimes, in a drought, when there's very little water available, the older females that are in the group may still remember a well or a pond or a river which didn't dry up in the last drought that may have happened even many years ago, and their memory is really good, and that serves them well when they are faced with dangers that they have encountered before, and so they can help the herd and protect the herd. They have a remarkable body part, which is called the trunk. And this is pretty unique in the world of animals. They use it for smelling, for feeding, for grabbing things. They spray themselves with water with the trunk. They drink with the trunk, so they suck up the water in the trunk and then put it in their mouth. And they even breathe, when they're underwater, and when they're sticking their trunk outside above the water. Sometimes they do really funny things, like bumping into a wall. I don't know what happened here, but when we were looking at this herd of elephant, one of them just simply hit the wall and on the ground and fell over, which was a pretty strange thing to watch. They have also a very interesting way of communicating with each other. They produce infrasound, which is sound that humans cannot hear, and it travels very far. So they can communicate with each other for kilometers away, when they're kilometers apart, without even seeing each other. And this is very useful, for example, in the forest, where they can't see each other, but they still stay in touch with each other using this very low sound. Where do they live? Well, they live in African elephants in sort of the middle of Africa, in both savanna and tropical forest. Savanna you find in eastern and southern and also western Africa. The tropical forest is in the central part of Africa, and they do well in both habitats. Savanna and tropical forest. They're both different habitats, and we call them ecosystems that they live in. Let's look at one of those ecosystems in the Serengeti National Park in Tanzania, where I did some work in the past. There are a lot of other animals that the elephants share the habitat with. There are about 1.5 million wildebeest, which you see in the upper right corner of the slide, that live in that park. There are lions, there are giraffes, impalas, and many other antelopes, and many other animals. And they all live together, and they live together in the same ecosystem, and they interact with each other. They're all part of a food web. And what is a food web? A food web is, you could see it's actually what you see here in the diagram is animals. They each have their place in the ecosystem. You have the consumers, the primary consumers, the animals that eat plants, like giraffes and rhinos, but also little grasshoppers, etc. And those animals are being eaten by predators. The lion, for example, they can eat giraffes, mostly the young ones and the vulnerable ones, but lions also eat antelopes, eat zebra, etc. And they're all, some predators eat birds, and then those predators are eaten by bigger predators, etc. So it's a very complicated network of animals interacting with each other. Now, what you see in an ecosystem is that animals are never, in numbers that are too big to overpopulate the system. And so they all live in some kind of balance with each other. Their populations don't grow forever. And which, if they would become overpopulated, would really harm the ecosystem. So what stops the ecosystem from having too many animals? And this is a very interesting question that scientists have been looking at for many decades, and put a lot of work in trying to find out what really regulates or control these numbers of animals. And what they found is that you have two main mechanisms of animal population control, or regulation as we call it. You have the first one is the top-down control. That is where we have predators like lions. They eat plant eaters like antelopes, which are called herbivores. And these herbivores, they are now eaten before they run out of food themselves. So they never really exhaust their food source, because their numbers are kept low or a bit lower than they could be by the predators. One of the main predators in the Serengeti, and there's a few, but one of them is, of course, the lions. And the lions, they kill animals from many different sizes, from small, very small antelopes to big buffaloes. Now, the bigger animals, they are controlled in a different way, because lions and other predators cannot kill enough of them to keep them low enough for their populations to grow. So large herbivores like buffalo and wildebeest, they eat plants, and they compete with each other for food. So eventually they run out of food. And when they run out of food, their numbers go down or stabilize, and that controls their numbers. So you have, So you have, for example, the wildebeest in the Serengeti National Park. They're always at a population around 1.3 to 1.5 million. They don't go much above it. They don't go much below it because they're controlled by food. When they run out of food, their population goes down. When there's a lot of food, their population grows, and that keeps them in balance. Now, for elephants, it's an interesting story because elephants are big. They're way too big to be killed by predators. So their numbers are not really controlled by predators. And originally, they probably would have been controlled by food and also by disease. The elephants, because humans are very successful predators, because they have tools to kill them like guns, they've had a very big impact on elephants and have, kept their numbers much lower than they could have been, and even killed a lot of elephants. So the numbers went down a lot in the last, say, 100 to 100 years or so. Now, elephants are also a very important species, and we call that a keystone species. And now I try to explain that concept. What is a keystone species? A keystone species is actually a species that has more impact on the ecosystem, or is more important in the ecosystem than another species. And the name comes from the keystone, which is a stone that holds an arc together. And if you remove that stone, the arc collapses. And the same happens with the keystone species. The keystone species has such an important role in an ecosystem that if you take it away, if you remove it from the ecosystem could collapse, or at least will be seriously impacted, and there will be a lot of changes happening. And I will illustrate that in the following slides. For example, elephants, they destroy young trees. They eat, sometimes they eat the branches of trees and leaves, etc. But they also topple over trees, big trees, to get to the food. So in doing that, they keep the system open and the savanna open, that a lot of other animals, like antelopes and grazers especially, also zebras and wildebeest, etc., they benefit from. And if you remove the elephants, the savanna, in some cases, would turn into more of a woodland, would become denser, and so would leave less space for other animals that need those open spaces. The same happens in the forest, in the rainforests in Central Africa, where you have these open spaces where there is salt and water, and elephants are attracted to them because they need the minerals, and they eat the salt actually in those places. But by being there, they also keep those places open, and they can be pretty big. And then again, these places attract other animals that normally that are also attracted to the salt licks, but also attracted to the vegetation that grows in these open spots. I had the privilege of visiting a few of those areas, which is actually amazing because you travel through dense forest. It's difficult to see anything. You don't see a lot of mammals because of the dense vegetation, and sometimes even you may bump into an elephant unexpectedly, which can be just a few meters or feet in front of you, and that could be a little dangerous. And there were a few occasions that we had to run really fast when we saw those elephants just appearing suddenly. But anyway, just to illustrate how difficult it is to see anything in those dense forests. But once you come to an open area like this one, it is incredible. You could see the elephants, but you can also see buffaloes and even gorillas. Gorillas are attracted to these places too. And yeah, and it's an amazing experience. And I remember even from a plane flying over these open spots and actually seeing the gorillas doing their thing from the plane, which normally is really hard to do because they're always in trees and in the forest. So another important role that elephants have is seed dispersal. So they eat the seeds of many trees, and then when they poop, the poop drops down somewhere else because they can travel quite far with the seeds in their belly, really in their guts, and then deposit the poop somewhere else. And the seeds they have already, a natural fertilizer to grow in, and they become trees, and so the trees can be dispersed through the elephants. This is very important, especially for bigger seeds and bigger trees, because elephants are the only ones that can really eat the really big trees. So the big trees can now be dispersed to other places. There are other seed dispersers like monkeys, birds. There are many of them in the forest, but they all, disperse seeds, from a certain size. And as I said, elephants, they can really eat the heavy seeds, and so they disperse them to other places. And if you take the elephants away, those big trees would, they get into trouble because they cannot propagate themselves. They cannot, be dispersed to other places. And that's what they see now in many places in Central Africa, where, you got these big trees, but you don't have many young trees, young ones of these big tree species that are growing because elephants are gone. They're being lost from the system. So without elephants, you have a few larger trees, and this has an impact on the climate because the big trees, they store a lot of carbon, and so when elephants disappear from the forest, you get less carbon stored, you get actually more carbon released, and that leads to, as we know, to global warming. So who would have thought that elephants would have an impact on the climate? This is only research that's been done quite recently in the last few decades, and which has shown these effects. Now, if you lose elephants in the forest, and elephants are an important keystone species in the forest suffers. But also the people who depend on the forest and who depend on, food from the forest will suffer as well because the forest eventually degrades. And all the other animals that live in the forest are affected as well. So what happened to elephants? Elephants used to be very common in Africa, and of course, we never really know how many there were, like in 1500 or 1600, but these are just estimates. But we think that there were like millions, many, many millions, maybe up to 20 or 25 million even. And they were all across the continent. And then they declined sharply and steadily to, say, the 1900s, where there were still maybe around 10 million elephants. And then you had a very sudden decline because of ivory hunting, of hunting elephants for ivory. And now they're really down to only a few 100,000. So why are there fewer and fewer elephants in Africa? Well, they're being hunted for ivory and meat. Their habitat is being lost by cutting, by logging, but also by agriculture, etc. And there's conflict with humans, and when they get into conflict with humans, they're often killed. So elephants have these amazing tusks, which is a blessing and a curse. They use the tusks to dig holes, for example, when they're looking for water and to defend themselves. but they're also cursed because they're made of ivory, and people happen to like ivory. So the tusks are really an extension of, or a really big front teeth that they have, and it's the same material as teeth. And ivory has been used by people for a long time, and to make jewelry, to make ornaments, to make little statues. Even billiard balls were made of ivory several decades ago, and this trade is still ongoing. So there's still a lot of demand for ivory, although there are not that many elephants anymore. So what can be done to stop this decline of elephants, to protect these elephants? First of all, of course, try to stop the ivory and the wildlife trade in general. It's a very difficult thing to do because ivory poachers, or people who hunt elephants illegally, they're very sophisticated. They're well armed. They even sometimes use helicopters to kill elephants from, and the people who have to protect them are often outnumbered, or especially in Central Africa, where I worked for quite a long time, they just don't have the equipment, they don't have enough people to defend and protect the elephants. So it's a difficult battle. But yes, there are also things that can be done to stop the trade in ivory and to try to reduce the demand for ivory. Another thing is to protect the habitat the elephants live in, and improve the lives of the people living in and around the habitat. Because if people are better off, they will also not put so much pressure on the habitat that they live in general. Then another thing, and I would talk a little bit about this, is rewilding, something I've been working on the last few years, which comes down to restoring habitat, to reintroduce, protect animals, reintroducing elephants, etc. We'll look at that. So there's been big discussions about ivory and ivory trafficking, and a lot of pressure on countries to have a ban on ivory imports over the years. And there is now a general ivory ban in most countries, including in countries where the demand, like China, where the demand was really high. And it's been quite successful in terms of convincing the countries of having these bans in the last, say, few years. But it is very difficult to control, because there's still a lot of illegal trafficking of ivory in black markets, etc. And again, that requires a law enforcement. It requires countries having the means to deal with this kind of trafficking. I will also say a little bit about rewilding, because rewilding is an important concept that is becoming more and more popular, as we see that ecosystems in the world are degrading, that species are being lost, and rewilding is seen as a solution actually to bring those ecosystems back to life, to make them healthy again, and basically to repair an ecosystem that's been damaged. And there's a few things, and I will, focus on elephants for this one, but there's a few things that rewilding does, and focuses on many different things, and one of them is to protect large areas, which generally ecosystems have to be large to harbor all the animals that live in the ecosystem, to have them interact with each other freely, and to be healthy. So protection is definitely a key, and we need to protect more. And there are some goals now 30% is to that some countries are trying to implement, is to protect 30% of their country actually by the year 2030, with varying success. Another thing is, because a lot of habitat has been lost, we can restore habitat. And this is a picture of, there was an elephant group a few years ago that was spotted in cultivated land on the road, in the farms. Really, these are Asian elephants, but they got lost in China. And I think that the world was really quite shaken by this picture then, because those animals didn't have much, a lot of place to go to. So restoring habitat is also important in habitat that is then being connected with the original habitat that still exists. So connecting different habitats is another important thing in rewilding. This is a map of Tanzania, and all the red dots are that's where the elephants occur, and all the arrows between the red dots are what we call corridors. It is areas where elephants move through, because they move really, really far, and they can move like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of kilometers. And that's why these corridors, or hallways, if you like, this is a habitat that they can move through, where there are no barriers, no big roads or fences or whatever. Is important for them to move between areas where they exist. And so rewilding tries to identify and then restore these corridors and these connections between protected areas. Another thing is how can we live with elephants? It's not easy. I mean, they're really big animals. They can be very destructive when they come into a field of a farmer, for example. They eat all the crops, and that is a very tough thing for the people living from their crops, and it could be a real disaster. So they can also be dangerous. I mean, some people get killed by elephants too when they come into villages, etc. So we have to learn to coexist with them. We can use fencing. We can use other means of protecting the farms. In this case, in the Masai Mara in Kenya, the Mara elephant project even uses a helicopter to chase elephants away when they enter fields of farmers. So resolving this human elephant conflict is also an important part of rewilding, so that elephants and humans can coexist in the same habitat. We can also move elephants, which is a really daunting operation because they're so big. They have to anesthetize, they have to then be transported in trucks. They've even transported in the past smaller elephants with helicopters, and they can move them from areas where there are too many elephants, that is areas where they're well protected, but where the area is becoming too small for the population which is growing, and they can be moved to other places where there are fewer elephants or non-existing anymore. So all these things are needed, and what can you do now for elephants and other wildlife in general? I think it's important to be conscious about nature and about how important nature is in general, and how important elephants is. So protection, is definitely everybody can contribute to protecting our nature, and also teaching other people about it, talking about it. Also consuming less, and especially products that harm nature and animals, or products that come from animals, or products, for example, that harm the habitat of elephants, like palm oil, where a lot of forest has been lost in Asia to oil palm plantations where elephants used to live. And supporting conservation organizations is also a thing that everybody can do. We have an organization like that in Canada, Elephanatics. And what we do is education. We also have been instrumental in convincing the Canadian government to ban domestic trade in ivory, which was a big achievement. And then we also support projects in the field in Kenya and other places, and education of people and children there as well. So you can find that on our website of what we do, and www. I'll show that slides again, elephanatics.org. To finish the presentation, just a little movie just to show you how magnificent these animals are. This is a young elephant. They're very playful. They love water. It's just amazing to see them in the wild like that when they're happy. And yeah, it's just inspiring to do more and try to protect them. And thank you for thank you for listening. I hope you learned something.
We certainly did. Thank you so much, Dr. Byers. And what a fantastic deep dive into elephants, both forest and the savannah. Again, the Serengeti personally is my favorite place I've ever visited on this planet. It was my university graduation gift to myself, and I've never had a better adventure. So if you get the chance to go to East Africa, students, take that chance. It's magical to see elephants in the wild, as well as all those other incredible species. And of course, all of you, you have that link. Please do check out elephanatics.org. There's so much to explore and discover there. And we've got a little bit of time together. I know we're nearing the end of the school day for a lot of you. So Mrs. Fisher's class, if you want to kick us off in Carsonville, we'll come to you. Miss McCluskey's class, you can share in the chat, and Miss Sterling in your virtual class will come to you in just a second as well. But Carsonville, if you want to kick us off with a question, you are good to go. Hey guys, hi.
Hello. How old can elephants get?
Ooh.
How old? Okay.
Yes.
Oh, well, it depends on whether they're in the wild. They can grow as old as 60 years or so. Some grow older, some are younger. In captivity, usually they where there are fewer threats, fewer disease, and they usually do a little better.
Yeah,
they grow a little older.
It's one of the things that sort of, I think we think of as natural, because humans live that long, but that's actually really unusual for an animal to live into its 60s on planet Earth. So elephants are pretty special in that way. It sort of underscores why we need to protect them. It's a long time before they start having the young of their own. And so I love this question for elephants in particular. Thanks, Mrs. Fisher's class. All right, Miss Sterling, if you want to come in with your virtual school, unmute your mic, come on in, take us away. Hey.
Hi. So my grade 5 student, Ricky, is curious about why elephants don't just sort of relocate or migrate themselves when their habitat is like too limited or being threatened.
Thanks, Ricky.
Yeah, that's a very good question. It is often because their habitat is surrounded by agriculture, or they could be roads, or they could even be fences. So they really, they can get stuck, as you will, in their habitat. And in the past, when their barriers were not there, they used to migrate or move from habitat to other habitats. And that's why it's so important to remove these barriers, to restore habitat between different areas where they live, and provide these corridors so they can move more freely. And also, when they are stuck in a smaller area and their population, continues to grow, they could actually start damaging that area, because they have nowhere to go, and they become, too numerous.
We talked about this in our earlier presentation too, which was a lot of human-elephant conflict and some of the ways we're working to mitigate that. Planet Earth 3 by the BBC had one of the most incredible bits of footage ever of Kenyan farmers having to fend off an elephant, because you're a farmer, you've spent your whole year on a crop, and one elephant comes in and destroys the entire year of your work in like hours. And so it's an increasing challenge around this planet where humans and elephants sort of coexist, especially in India and East Africa. And there's a lot of really innovative solutions working to prevent that sort of conflict. So I love this question very much. Thanks, Mr.
Yeah. I just want to add that, because I had some personal experience with that too in Gabon, where I work, where elephants were destroying the crops of farmers, and we were trying to find ways of mitigating that. And one thing was fencing, but of course, they're very strong and can destroy fences. So the fences have to be really quite strong. And another way is using chili peppers, for example. People were using that plant around the fields, and they deter elephants. And then another way was just having people on guard, day and night when elephants were spotted nearby. And we were then providing information about elephants, where elephants were, and then people would just rotate and watch out for
anything
elephants.
that helps. I love our Mozambique biologist who comes on regularly. She works with elephants and bees, so they put beehives all around the edge of the farm field, and elephants won't cross that. They're very afraid of bees, which is really interesting. So when you think like an elephant or think like an animal, it can often make a big difference in how we help preserve them, especially in that conflict scenario. So great question, guys.
Yeah.
Miss McCluskey's class has a either really hard or really easy one, Renee, which is how much can elephants lift? They've got that incredible trunk. Do we have a sense of how big? Could they pick up a person, for instance, or much bigger than that?
Oh, well, I'm actually unsure about that, but they can pick up a person, yes, and probably bigger things too. But if they could pick up a car, I don't think so. But they do destroy cars. They do use not just their trunk, but their whole body, and even their feet sometimes to trample cars. I've seen cars have been completely destroyed by elephants, so they're very powerful.
This got brought up in the earlier broadcast too, and I can tell you, having been on the Serengeti safari, and you're in a big Jeep, way bigger than my car I drive around in, and an elephant, we startled it, and it flared its ears out and took a step towards us, and you feel like you're in a very small thing when you're in that big Jeep when an elephant looks at you the wrong way. So you're very respectful from then on, and let the elephant go about its business, because they are a big animal for a reason.
Yeah. No, we had that too. We had to, drive really fast when we were charged by an elephant, and we were also, in a big Jeep. We just didn't take chances.
Oh dear. Renee, time flies and you're having fun. We are nearing the end of the broadcast. Is there a final message on elephants that you'd recommend for our kids? We've got a lot of elementary school students today. If they wanted to learn more about elephants or get involved in some way, what would you push them towards?
Yeah, I would definitely go to our website, Elephanatics.org. There's a lot of material on elephants there, a lot of education, a lot of work that has been put in lesson plans for teachers, for example, by very dedicated people. I think it's worth looking at that, and it gives you some ideas about what you can do, what you can learn, and of course there's some references to other websites. There's also a bit about rewilding. Yeah, that's something if you want to, and you can get involved. I mean, you can, even as a volunteer, or you could support organizations like that. And generally, and yes, if you have a chance to go to Africa, by all means, because tourism is a really important source of income for many African countries, and people are attracted to elephants, and that's one reason why those countries have an interest in protecting them.
Absolutely. It's always better when we have a setup where animals are worth much more alive than dead. And again, when it's a place like Kenya or Gabon or Mozambique, people flock there to see these incredible creatures. And it's really exciting to see that rise and rise around the world and be done in a sustainable and environmentally friendly way. So I really encourage you, get out there if you can. And as a really easy thing, tell your family and friends what you learned today. The more you share your love for elephants, the more people will be vested in their survival, and the more we'll be able to appreciate them in a future of abundance in the decades to come. So
yeah, absolutely. I mean, especially when you're still young, you're learning. You talk to other people. You talk to your friends. You talk to your parents. Because parents also can learn a lot still.
They certainly can. Elephanatics.org is the best place to go. Thank you so much for the special plug. And as we do to wrap up every broadcast, I'm going to bring in our teachers to say thank you and farewell. If you're on YouTube and you want to scream and yell and annoy the principal, you can too. But Miss Sterling, on behalf of the virtual school, Mrs. Fisher, thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.